All right, so blockchain. Blockchain. Um, you hear that word, and I bet you think Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, most people do.
But you know what? We're going way beyond just cryptocurrency in this deep dive.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We've got like all these excerpts here about 10 different types of blockchains, and some of them are like seriously mind-blowing. Like I had no idea.
Yeah, it really is like discovering a whole new ecosystem,
Hmm. Yeah.
and understanding all these different types of blockchains. That's really the key to seeing how much potential they have.
Mhm.
I mean, it goes way beyond just digital currency.
Yeah.
So today we're going to like break it all down. We'll lay the foundation and then we'll dive into some really cool real world stuff that I think is going to surprise you.
Okay, so I think it's helpful to just start with blockchain 101, right? Like in case someone's tuning in for the first time, like what are we even talking about here?
Right.
Blockchain, it's a digital ledger, right? Kind of like a really really secure way to keep records.
Yeah, think of it as a digital fingerprint for every single transaction.
Mm.
And that makes it almost impossible to tamper with the data. Which, I mean, think about it. That's really what enables these transactions to happen without needing a traditional middleman.
Oh, okay.
Like, for example, take the Stellar Network. It uses this consensus protocol where everyone on the network has to agree that a transaction is valid. And they do that without needing a bank or any other intermediary. It's pretty revolutionary.
Definitely shakes things up. So all right, I've heard a lot about these public and private blockchains. What's the difference and like why should I care as just a regular person?
Great question. It all comes down to access. So a public blockchain, like Bitcoin, it's completely open to anyone. Like
Yeah.
literally anyone can join the network. They can view the transaction
Yeah.
history. They can participate, and they don't need permission from anybody. And that's what makes them so transparent and resistant to censorship.
Yeah.
But there are trade-offs,
Yeah. Like what?
like scalability, meaning how quickly the network can process transactions. Since everybody's involved in verifying transactions on a public blockchain, it can get bogged down. So private blockchains, on the other hand, they're permission only. Think of it like a company's internal network, right? They're way faster, much more efficient.
Yeah.
But it raises questions about centralization because a single entity often controls the access.
Okay, so public is like all about transparency, private is about control. Are there other types of blockchains out there? Give me the lay of the land.
You've got consortium blockchains. These are kind of like a hybrid. Control is shared between a group of organizations. We see these a lot in things like finance or supply chain management. And then you have hybrid blockchains, which try to combine the best of both worlds, like public and private. It really just depends on the specific problem you're trying to solve.
So it's like each one has its own strengths and weaknesses. It's not one size fits all. This all kind of ties back to this idea of like blockchain governance, right? Like
Yeah,
who's calling the shots?
exactly. Governance it's crucial. It dictates who gets to decide what happens on the network, how changes get implemented, whether it's a decentralized system like Bitcoin or a private blockchain run by a company. Understanding the governance is critical. It helps you evaluate the benefits and the risks.
Okay, so we got the basics down, but let's get real. Like how is blockchain actually being used? Like I know there's more to it than just like buying a pizza with Bitcoin.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, remember that whole DeFi movement I was talking about?
Hmm.
That's leveraging public blockchains to try and create a whole new financial system. Imagine a world where you can access loans, investments, all those financial services without even going through a bank.
That's a game changer. What about private blockchains? Like, how are companies actually putting those to work?
Take Walmart, for example.
Mm.
They're using a private blockchain to keep track of all their produce. So, like, from the farm to the shelf, they're tracking it on the blockchain. Yeah. Which helps them do a lot of things. Helps them improve efficiency, helps
Mm.
them reduce waste, and it can even pinpoint the source of contamination if there's ever like an outbreak or something.
So it's like having a super detailed history for every single item.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And it's not just for logistics either. Think about banks. They're using consortium blockchains to securely share data and, to streamline all their transactions. So this could reduce costs, improve transparency. It can even help prevent fraud.
Wow. I mean, so, listening to this, starting to feel like blockchain can impact almost every single industry, you know? I mean, are we just scratching the surface here?
Yeah, I think we really are. I mean, the potential applications of this technology are still unfolding. I want you
Oh.
to think about, like, as we go deeper here, I want you to think about how blockchain could impact your own life and the things you're interested in, the industries that you are interested in. Okay, so you definitely got me hooked. But before we go too far, There are some like big questions about blockchain that I think we need to address. Like,
Right.
how secure are these systems really? What about the cost of all this? Like, how much does it cost? And like the environmental impact of all this computing power? Like, what's the deal with that?
Yeah, yeah, no, those are all really, really good questions. And those are exactly the things that we're going to be tackling in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, so stay tuned, folks.
Hmm.
Things are about to get even more interesting.
Oh.
Okay, so back for more on this blockchain deep dive. And we just scratched the surface of all these different types of blockchains out there,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
But, one thing that I'm still, I don't know, a little fuzzy on is this whole permissioned versus permissionless thing.
Ah, yeah, yeah. That is a key distinction. Remember we were talking about remember the public park and the gated community analogy we used?
Yeah, yeah. So permissionless blockchains, those are like the public park. Like Bitcoin, for example, anyone can join, anyone can participate, anyone can see what's going on.
So true decentralization. Got it. Okay, so but what about the permissioned blockchains? Like those are more like the exclusive clubs.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Think of it like a company that's using a blockchain to manage their supply chain. They might only give permission to certain suppliers or partners to access that data.
Okay.
So it allows for a lot more control and efficiency. But it does raise those questions about centralization that we were talking about before.
Right. Right, because if a small group has all the keys to the castle, who's to say that they're not going to manipulate things for their own benefit? And that brings us back to governance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Governance is so crucial in any blockchain system, but especially in the permissioned ones, because it determines who has the authority to make decisions, who sets the rules, who gets to control access, all of that.
It's like the constitution for a digital nation. Okay. All right. So we've got the permission versus permissionless thing. But then there's also this whole centralized versus decentralized thing. Are those two concepts related at all?
They're definitely connected, but let's break it down. So a centralized blockchain, think of that like having one main computer or server that controls the entire network.
Okay.
Okay, it's efficient, right? It's easy to manage. But if that central point fails, the whole system could go down.
Yeah, that kind of defeats the purpose of a blockchain, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the whole idea of a decentralized blockchain comes in. The data is distributed across like a whole network of computers. So you don't have that single point of failure. And that's actually what makes blockchains like Bitcoin so resilient. Like, it's hard to censor them, it's hard to attack them because it's not all in one place.
So it's like a digital safety net. Even if one part of the network goes down, the system as a whole can keep running. But, isn't there a downside to all that distributed power? Like, doesn't it make things kind of, I don't know, more complex to manage?
It definitely presents some challenges. Like, decision making can be slower, right?
Right.
Reaching consensus can be more difficult when everybody has kind of an equal say. But you have to remember, those challenges are also what makes those decentralized systems so resistant to manipulation.
So it's like always,
Yeah.
It's a trade-off. You gain resilience, you gain security, but you potentially sacrifice some efficiency.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
And that actually leads us to another really important consideration, which is the whole idea of security versus scalability. These two things are often kind of in a tug of war in the blockchain world.
Okay, so I'm sensing another trade-off coming here. Break it down for me. Like, how do those two concepts clash?
All right. So security, I mean, it's paramount, right? In any system that's dealing with sensitive data, digital assets,
Yeah.
and public blockchains like Bitcoin, they rely on that really strong cryptography, those hash functions, the digital fingerprints that we were talking about.
Uh-huh.
That's how they maintain security. But all those complex calculations can really slow things down.
So it's like having a super secure vault, but with this really complicated lock.
Yes.
It's safe, but it takes forever to get in and out of it.
That is a perfect analogy. And that's why scalability is so important. It refers to a network's ability to handle a growing number of transactions quickly and efficiently. And as you can imagine, security and scalability, they often butt heads.
So how do developers tackle this problem? Is there like a magic bullet solution?
There's no magic bullet, but there are some really fascinating solutions emerging. Have you ever heard of layer 1 and layer 2 networks?
Vaguely. It sounds like something out of like a sci-fi movie.
Well, think of it this way. Layer 1 is like the foundation, okay?
Correct.
It's the base blockchain network itself. But as that network gets busier, transactions can start to pile up,
Hmm.
and that can lead to delays. It can lead to higher fees.
Kind of like traffic congestion on a really busy highway.
Precisely. And that's where these layer 2 solutions come in. Imagine building a separate lane above that congested highway. So these layer 2 networks, they handle transactions off-chain, meaning they're not directly burdening the main blockchain.
So it's like creating an express lane for those transactions to kind of bypass all the traffic jams.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really clever way to improve scalability without having to compromise security.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of different layer 2 solutions out there. Like
Yeah.
there's state channels, there's side chains, there's even something called roll-ups. It's a whole world of innovation.
It really sounds like innovation is like in the core DNA of blockchain, you know?
Yeah.
Always pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings us back to those real-world applications that we were discussing. Um, remember how Walmart's using those private blockchains for supply chain management?
Hmm.
The digital fingerprint for every head of lettuce?
Right?
Well, imagine if you could combine that level of tracking with something called smart contracts. So these are basically self-executing contracts that can automatically enforce the terms of an agreement. Like, for example, imagine a payment being released automatically when a shipment arrives.
Whoa. So no more like disputes, no more delays. Everything just happens automatically.
That's the idea.
Mhm.
Smart contracts have the potential to really revolutionize a lot of industries, like from supply chains to real estate to insurance claims. Like, it could be huge.
My mind is officially blown. What other use cases are we talking about here?
Well, think about healthcare. Imagine if your medical records were securely stored on a blockchain, and you could give permission for any doctor that you choose to access them.
You know, as someone who's had to like deal with the nightmare of transferring medical records, that would be amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
It could improve patient care. It
Mhm.
could reduce costs. It could even help with, research and drug development.
I mean, I'm starting to see how this could like touch almost every part of our lives, but I also have to admit, with all this talk of potential, I'm also wondering about the downsides, right?
Yeah.
Like, how secure are these systems, in reality? What about the environmental impact of all this computing power that we're using?
Those are all really valid concerns, and those are
Yeah.
the exact things that we're going to be tackling in the final part of our deep dive.
Buckle up, everyone, because it sounds like we're going even deeper. Okay, so welcome back for like the final part of our blockchain journey.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the basics, we talked about some really amazing applications, but now I think it's time to get real about like the challenges, right?
Mhm.
Like, what are the downsides?
Yeah.
And and I'm particularly interested in the whole security thing, right? Like, we've been talking about this cryptography, these like digital fingerprints, the hash functions, but how do we really know that these systems are like truly tamper-proof?
That's a great question, and I think the short answer is that no system is ever 100% foolproof, right?
Right.
Um, so while blockchain's underlying cryptography is incredibly strong, I mean, it's very, very robust.
Yeah.
There are always potential vulnerabilities. I mean, think of it like a bank vault, right?
Yeah.
You can have the strongest steel, the most complex locks. There's always a chance that somebody could find a way in.
So what are some of the ways that somebody could crack the code, so to speak, when it comes to blockchain?
Well, one concern, especially with these public blockchains, is something called the 51% attack.
Mm.
And essentially what that means is if a single entity were to gain control of more than 50% of the computing power on the entire network, they could potentially manipulate the ledger. They could even like reverse transactions.
That sounds terrifying.
It's basically like hijacking the system from the inside.
But how realistic is that, really?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that take like massive amounts of resources to actually pull that off?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It would. I mean, for major blockchains like Bitcoin, a 51% attack is extremely unlikely.
Yeah.
Just because the network is so vast, it's so decentralized, it would require an insane amount of computing power. I mean, we're talking about astronomical amounts of energy. But smaller, newer blockchains, the ones that don't have such established networks, they might be a little bit more susceptible.
Okay.
It's definitely something to keep in mind when you're evaluating, different platforms.
So it's like the difference between trying to rob Fort Knox versus, like your local bank.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But, beyond these like network level attacks, are there other security risks that we should be thinking about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, remember we were talking about those private keys,
Yeah.
those secret codes that give you access to all your digital assets?
Yeah.
Well, if somebody gets a hold of your private keys, they can basically drain your accounts. Doesn't matter how secure the blockchain itself is.
Yikes.
It's like having a super secure safe, but you leave the key under the doormat.
Yeah. So user error is still a major factor, even with all this fancy technology.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, security it's a multifaceted challenge. It's not just about the technology, it's about education, it's about awareness, it's about best practices for things like key management.
Right.
It's kind of like, wearing a seatbelt, right?
Right.
The car might have all the latest safety features, but you still got to be responsible for your own safety.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another big concern.
Yeah.
And that's cost. We touched on transaction fees, we talked about implementation costs, but I got to admit I'm a little bit wary of those like hidden costs that often pop up with, new technologies.
No, I hear you. I think one cost that's often overlooked is the energy consumption, right?
Yeah.
Especially with these public blockchains that use a proof of work consensus mechanism like Bitcoin. They require a ton of computing power to verify all those
Yeah.
transactions. And all those computers crunching all those numbers, they're using up a lot of electricity, which obviously raises concerns about, the environmental impact.
It does seem like a bit of a contradiction, right?
Right.
Like this amazing revolutionary technology that could like change the world,
But
but at the expense of the planet.
it's a valid concern for sure,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily a black and white issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, not all blockchains are created equal when it comes to energy consumption. There are a lot of newer blockchains that are using these alternative consensus mechanisms, like proof of stake, and those are way more energy efficient.
Okay, so there are greener options out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's an area that's, there's tons of development happening in that area right now. Plus, I mean, you also have to weigh the potential benefits against the costs, right? Like, what if blockchain could help us create more sustainable supply chains? What if it could help us reduce waste?
Yeah.
What if it could help us, transition to renewable energy sources? You have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's not just about the immediate energy consumption. It's about the potential for positive change down the line.
Exactly.
So speaking of, looking ahead, what about the legal landscape?
Yeah.
It seems like, a lot of these regulations are still kind of playing catch up to this technology, which is, moving so fast.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, governments all around the world are still trying to figure out how to regulate all this, how to regulate blockchain, how to regulate cryptocurrencies. There's concerns about money laundering, there's concerns about tax evasion, there's concerns about consumer protection. It's definitely a complex area,
Yeah.
and it's changing all the time.
So there's still a lot of uncertainty, and like that can be kind of unsettling, right?
Uncertainty is always a part of the deal when you're dealing with any emerging technology.
Right.
But you have to remember, uncertainty also breeds opportunity. It's a chance for us to kind of shape the future of this technology
Right.
and to make sure that it's used for good.
I like that perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap things up, it seems like, blockchain it's this incredibly powerful tool,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It has the potential to revolutionize, tons of different industries.
Absolutely.
But it's not like a silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
There are challenges, there are risks, and there are a lot of important questions that we need to be asking, as a society.
I think you said it perfectly. I mean, it's really up to all of us to stay informed, to engage in thoughtful discussions about this,
Yeah.
and to really make sure that this technology is being developed and used responsibly.
Well said. Well said. I gotta say this whole deep dive has been really eye-opening for me. I feel like I've gotten a much deeper understanding of blockchain. Not just the hype, but also the realities,
Yeah.
the potential, the challenges.
Yeah. And that's really what we aim for with these deep dives.
Yeah.
To really kind of go beyond the surface, I mean, we've just scratched the surface.
Right.
But hopefully this has sparked your curiosity to learn more, to continue exploring this.
It definitely has. And for our listeners out there who want to learn more, I just want to remind you about that great resource that we mentioned, theblockchainstate.com. It's a fantastic starting point for anyone who wants to, really dig in and learn more.
Absolutely. I mean, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Especially in this space that's moving so quickly. So keep learning, stay curious,
Yeah.
And, who knows? Maybe you'll be the one who develops the next groundbreaking blockchain application.
Now, wouldn't that be something? All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of blockchain. Until next time, keep exploring.